start before they make up their marks. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening, and I must say it's a little bit odd, I think, for both Louise and myself, since we started this dialogue 32 or 33 years ago, and we've never before had so many eavesdroppers.
Camera down when they're not using it.
So I thought, for those who have sort of just come in on the play, I would begin, Louise, by asking you if you could say something about, I suppose, what was the really first turning point in your development as an artist when you went. I think it was extremely unusual for an American artist or an aspiring artist to go to Germany when you did, to study with Hans Hofmann, who of course was very little heard of in this country at that time. It was before, of course, before Hofmann emigrated and became one of the distinguished American painters, as well as one of the distinguished American teachers of art. And I think that you were perhaps the only American artist of this period to study with Hofmann in Germany.
No, actually the school was established before I got there. But when I got there in 1931, there was already a problem with the Nazis. And we used to have to pass Hitler's home every day to go to the school. So Hans Hofmann was aware of it. And what had happened was that he had taught the summer before out in Berkeley. And so he was getting ready to leave Germany. I didn't know too much about it, but I myself became a little nervous because maybe not in America unless you're political minded, but in Germany, particularly in Munich, where that was Hitler's headquarters, there was an excitement and there was an uncertainty and there was already a feeling of insecurity. So I didn't stay as long as I had intended, but I left there and did some traveling through Europe, to Italy and other parts of Europe, and then ended up in Paris and came home. But the reason
you were studying painting then?
Yes, yes. But the reason I did go there was that we were not in America acquainted with the European artists like the Picassos, Matisses, really the giants of that period. And where do you go when you want to do something? You go to the best. And I thought it was the best. I will say, to finish that question, when Hofmann came to America, and he started the school here, then in Provincetown, and the GI Bill. So he was very successful as a teacher, anyway. And his success in America had mellowed him, and he was a much more rounded human being, and became a more modest human being. And I liked him when he was not my teacher, but as a friend later.
Well, I think the other important association that many of us have in regard to your career in the 30s was your experiences in Mexico. And I think we've all recognized that the Mexican pyramids, the whole pre-Columbian culture, as well as the contemporary, the scale of the contemporary mural movement at the time. You were much involved with Diego Rivera in that project. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, because I think that's an aspect of your development some of us regard as very important, but which is perhaps not very, rather little known.
Yes. Well, I met Diego Rivera and Frida in New York in 1932. And he wanted a few assistants. And one of my dear friends, Marjorie, who was a painter then, introduced me to them. And so we all became friends. As a matter of fact, they had a studio and we had a studio in the same building. Now, this is the most important part of the whole thing, besides Diego Rivera. I was so fascinated. In 1951, I went down and went to Oaxaca and went all the other places with the Mexican work. And so we were having a meeting in a museum, and people were talking about the primitiveness of the work in Mexico. Well, I had seen the work in Mexico, and I was ready to say that it was as sophisticated and developed as any other work that had been done. We always think naturally of Egypt and the pyramids and all that, which are great, but I think Mexico can stand up to any part of the world for what it has done. And it's not primitive. So I think that's funny when they call it primitive. Stupid.
Well, I think when those first big environmental exhibitions that you did in the 50s, which for many of us was our first glimpse of the real scale of your work, I think we associated some of that with that pre-Columbian scale. That was certainly one of the elements. But could you say something about what were the other sources that you were conscious of at the time? After all, you'd been an artist for some time before that, before those extraordinary breakthrough years.
Look, this is a statement I'm going to make that I haven't made. People feel that the artist must do everything. Now, I feel if the artist feels they must do everything, it's folk art. You see, I feel that the recognition of what you see is as important as what you do. You don't have to do everything by hand. Artists, even to this day, are boasting they did this and they did that. That is not the ultimate. Art is made up of everything. When you talk about Mexico or you talk about the other things, when you live through all these periods, they become assimilated and become part of you. And then you can see one world, one place, you don't have to have divisions. And if I pick up a piece of wood, for instance, in the beginning, say the automobiles go past the house, maybe 1,000 of them a day, and they make their imprints by the tire into that wood. That makes a statement. Do I have to do it by hand and that makes it more valuable? I would like that really recognized, because people talk about found objects and they talk about things like that. That really doesn't mean much. But if you analyze it truly and you give it its value, I think it would open up a whole new area.
Well, of course, a lot depends on who finds the found object.
Well, we'll start on that.
Well, I wish you would say something, though, about the extraordinary scale of those exhibitions in the 50s that you had at the Grand Central Moderns Gallery, because they were really such a new experience for all of us at the time. And as I think certainly you and I and other people in this room will remember, people weren't sure what to do with them, because they were not primarily exhibitions of objects. they were what afterwards came to be called environments, or whole assemblages of objects that were lighted in a certain way, designed to create a certain kind of total impact. And as much as I have written about your work over the years, I must say I've never been entirely clear myself, I wonder if you are, as to what it came out of. I mean, it was so audacious at the time, it had literally never been done.
Well, I'd have to be a nice guy to answer you. But let me say this, that art, or I'd like another word for it, it is really living, something living, alive. And besides the technique, anyone can go to college and take a degree and learn that blue and yellow makes green. Those are things you learn. But there's something else about the human species that no one has yet gone into the roots of the being, of the human being. Now, I attribute some of those things to a physical thing, that we're born with a certain energy, creative energy, and if it's alive, it moves. So if someone wants to climb the highest mountain, where is it, in the Himalayas? Well, I'd like to walk across this room. You see, so it hasn't altogether, we can't pin it down and make a study and say, art is this, art is, because it depends, first, I think it depends on the genes, what you're born with. I think we're born ready-made, like the egg is. I think we're born ready-made. And if you're not born ready-made, you may make art, but it's not necessarily the basic creative act.
Well, I can see you're not going to divulge your secrets.
Well, it wouldn't be, it's not necessary.
Yes. Well, I remember when we first met, which was 30-some years ago, you said to me, well, I've only ever sold 5 sculptures in my life. You want to say something about those years when you were
All right.
working without interruption, and unlike the situation today, nobody was paying really any attention to what you were doing?
Well, I feel the same way now as I felt then. I really work for myself. It may sound selfish, but what I have done in my life, and it is a long life, is I want to recognize or realize what life's about. And I'm not making a thing. When an artist says I have this pattern or that, I kind of laugh. They say I'm like a doctor or something. I do all my work from one point of view in all these years. And that is, and I hope to go on the same way, that is that the more I do, the more life reveals itself to me. When you're not selling that, you're not buying it. You see. Now, if in time that now things go where they do, that's very nice because it permits me to be more productive and fulfill the same route that I started with. And it hasn't really changed.
Well, I will say from my own observation over these decades that you've probably changed less than any other artist I've known in that period. That is as a woman and as an artist. But you've known a lot of artists, and I want to ask some questions about that. But I'm tempted to tell a story which you would probably not tell. When Louise became more and more renowned in the late 50s and early 60s, of course, artists, many celebrated ones, Roscoe and Arp and Duchamp and others, began feeling that a visit to Spring Street was sort of an obligation. I mean, it was part of keeping up your credentials. And I think it was Dorothy Miller who arranged for Duchamp to come to your house, if I recall correctly. And Louise told me this. I happened to arrive a few hours after Duchamp had left. And Louise told me the following story. She said, just before Duchamp left, he turned to her and said, "Oh, Mrs. Nevelson, isn't it a pity that we didn't meet years ago?" And Louise said to him, "Oh, I don't think so. Then I would have been bowled over by you. And now I'm not." But it must have been an extraordinary thing in your life when Jean Arc or other artists who were part of the, you might say, among the fixtures of the history of art, began paying your work that kind of attention. I mean, what did it feel like?
Well, this is really the way I feel. From the earliest memory that I have, that I was born to do what I'm doing. So it gave me a lot of confidence. I didn't do it for Duchamp, and I didn't do it for Picasso, and I didn't do it for anyone. I did it because I wanted to know why I was here. And I recall going to Paris in 1932 and going into a hotel, and I think it was probably the saddest time in my life because other things were happening. And I wrote for 2 days, call it poems of some sort. And I said, at sea, what can it be that I remained so long at sea? You see, I was searching really for myself. And so, no one will believe this, but I was shy in the bargain. So that, yeah.
It does defy credulity.
So that was the problem. But the thing is that I really knew what I wanted out of this earth. I'm not saying world, but I knew. And nothing else measured up to it. Of course I experimented. I wasn't going to croak without knowing what life was about. I was curious, and I did that. And I found that nothing measured up to what I was doing. And so if you want to say that I had all the confidence I needed to do what I did, yes, I had it. And in the hardest time, I never thought for a moment not to do it. Never thought. I was too stupid. I didn't know how to do anything else. You see?
Well, it was amazing in the 50s, in the house Louise occupied before she moved to Spring Street, when she had this house on East 30th Street, which I described in my new book. The experience of going to this house was absolutely amazing at the time, because from the street it looked like an ordinary townhouse on East 30th Street, long since torn down. But when you entered into the house, there was nothing in this house but sculpture. I mean, it was absolutely everywhere. It filled all the rooms, it hung on the walls of the staircases, it filled all the bathtubs. I used to wonder, I thought there must be some place in this house where somebody can take a bath, but my eyes never were able to find it. And it was absolutely, and of course nobody bought the sculptures in those years, nobody wrote about them, nobody paid much attention to them. And yet the production was absolutely unremitting. And this accumulation, this incredible accretion of sculptures filling up this house, which began to sort of define the beginning of what your exhibitions began to look like. I mean, so that I think the few people like myself who were privileged to see that house were not as shocked or amazed, perhaps, by those early exhibitions at the Grand Central Moderns Gallery, because they were perhaps perhaps more coherently planned version of the experience of being immersed in this sort of sculptural garden, which is what the house was.
Well, Hilton, before that, what year was it? 1941. I was really desperate. And if I knew how to shoot, I'd get a gun, but I don't know how to shoot. So I didn't. So one day, and I never asked, you know, the galleries. I didn't do that. I was too busy anyway. But one day when I was very, very desperate, I said, I want to have a show. And I said, what is the best gallery in New York? And that was in 1941, between 40 and 41. And I said, Nierendorf's gallery was the best at that time. So I went into Nierendorf's, and I asked to see Mr. Nierendorf. And now this is several years before,
Yeah.
you see. And so the young lady said, what's your name? And I told her. She went back and told Mr. Nierendorf, and he came on, and he said, what do you want? Or, what do you want? And I said, I want to show here. He said, but I don't know your work. And I said, well, you can see it. And he said, where do you live? I said, 30th. No, I was on 21st Street for a while, also east. And he said, I'm going to have dinner with Ozenthal, who had a school on 19th Street, and I'll come in early after dinner and see your work. I said, fine. So he did, and he said, I'm going to Mexico for a few weeks, and you can have a show as soon as I get back. I said, fine. So I got busy and cleaned up the work, and we had a show. And the raves were wonderful. They were just wonderful. So then the next year I had a show. Then when we're talking about Peggy Guggenheim, I showed with her. She had a show for women, the artists and sculptors. And then Mr. Nierendorf was called back to Germany because the wall was open. And he intended to stay a few weeks, but he stayed a long time. Well, anyway, he came back and called me Saturday. And I was supposed to have lunch with him Monday for a show. And I'd already had 2 or 3 shows with him, one year after another. But someone called me Sunday and said, Mr. Nierendorf just died. I didn't believe it, but it was true. So I didn't want a show for about 5 years. I didn't want a show for other reasons. And then the Grand Central, Colette Roberts kept after me, and finally I said, fine, I'll have a show. And that's the way we started. But I think a lot of it is creative energy. You see, I feel also that when you have a baby, you have labor pain. But in creation, you have spiritual labor pain. You see, you do. I mean, you go through another dimension. There's no doubt about it. I read in the paper, I think the other day, I didn't read it too carefully, where they are finding where the human mind goes in, like some take dope. Well, they automatically, the brain does move into these different areas. If you permit it, you move with it. And if you work, you get excited. And we take a lot of cliches for granted. We say this or that. But now with science, looking into these things, are finding that if you're creating, say, truly, that you do go into another state.
Well, certainly, I think people who have found themselves immersed in their work find themselves transported into quite a different state. But it must have been rather thrilling suddenly to find that so many people whose responses you respected, suddenly felt they had discovered something very important in your work.
may I tell you, in the Oriental philosophies, in the Hindu philosophies, the Indian philosophies, well, before I tell the story, Shakespeare was practically a neighbor. He's only about 400 years ago. He said, life's a stage, we all play a part. Now, Beethoven, comparatively modern. We think, because that he took the octave, 8 notes, that he changed the whole world. Well, the truth of the matter is, the octave was here long before he used it. See, so they are comparatively our neighbors. But if you can take it or leave it, what I'm saying now, after. The Indian philosophy, the Penishons and all the other things, they say that there is no world. Shakespeare says that, but that every human being projects a world. Since they project a world, that means that everybody in it you recognize, you identify with. I don't mean personally you go and say hello with it, but I mean you recognize. Therefore, you're responsible for your projection. Then you won't kill, then you won't hurt, because you want to actually enhance the world. You see, now, I can believe it or not, but if it gives me comfort, and I know that the religions have been formed by groups, and also in different countries, and colors have humans, blacks in Africa, for instance, that country permitted that. They belong to that land, you see. So I can't get caught in any one particular religion. That doesn't mean that you don't believe that there is an unknown universe full of wonderful things that are not here. You see, so I'm not pinpointing, but I'm not forming or going to any particular one. One moves from this, one becomes a Catholic today, and then they read a book and they become a Protestant. What's that got to do with it? What's that really got to do with religion as such? You see, it's a part. Now, so I don't demand that what I say about the Indian philosophy is the truth, but it suits me, and I like it. And so it gives me comfort. So by ending on that note, I want to tell you, so that no one on earth can bother me. When he says he likes it, she says she doesn't like it. What in the hell do I care?
Well, I think I know your answer to this next question, but pro forma, I'll ask it anyway. Does it interest you to pay attention to what new things are going on in the art world today? Or,
yes, it does.
I mean, you know, many people complain that there are too many artists. They ask too much money for their work. They are written about too often in Vogue magazine, or, you know, the customary litany of complaints. I mean, there's a kind of nostalgia for the days when artists were poor. That it's a nostalgia among non-artists. And I wonder how all that strikes you, since you've seen it all.
Well, now, I've been asked that question before.
I rather expected you had.
Now, the thing is, if we see this great energy and violence in the paintings and in the sculpture, why shouldn't it be? It's reflecting our times. Why should they sit in an attic in Ivory Tower? It would be stupid. So I will not negate what is being done. I don't have to do it, but but that doesn't mean that I would negate it. I think there's something kind of remarkable that they found the subways and the graffitis. They made this city look exciting. And I thought when Lindsay was mayor and he was spending money to clean it every day, that was stupid. Because out of that, you can see what has happened. Give it a break.
Well, it certainly has had its break, and maybe more than a break.
Now wait, no, I'm not talking about the success. I didn't mean that. I meant the reflection of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because the violence all over the world. Look, see this table? Well, all over the earth, there's fire. All over the earth. Show me a place where there isn't violence and wars and everything. We're living in a very tough age. See, so the artist must reflect it.
But it has become really a very different thing to be an artist today, don't you think?
Well, that, yes, but look, is that my business?
Well, you think it's tougher to be an artist or easier today?
Well, for me, it's easy.
Well, it's only easier because you've been through the tough times. Thank you very much, Louise.
Thank you.